turn. Yep.
Good morning, Council. I will ask Councillor Robinson to open the meeting with Karakia.
Kia hora te marino. Kia whakapapa punamu te moana. Hai huarahi mā tātou I te rangi nei. Aroha atu araha mai. Tātou E a tātou katoa. Hui e taike e. May peace be widespread. May the sea be like greenstone, a pathway for us all this day. Let us show respect for one another. Let us show respect for each other, for one another, bind us together.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. Welcome to the Council's Draft Annual Plan Deliberations meeting, the Mahere Atau 2026-27. I've been informed we've got a quorum present, and I'm pleased to declare the meeting open. Deputy Chair Ian Cramwell is going to come in online, and I see Councillor Lamont is also online. Do I have any apologies at this stage? I might just note that Councillor Cramwell isn't online yet, but he has notified that he will be.
Yes.
Are there any conflicts of interest? Excuse me. Okay, so procedural motions. On page 5 of the agenda, recommendation is on page 5. Stephen Hill, General Manager of Governance, will come to introduce this report.
Kia ora, Mr Chair, councillors. This is a procedural motion which we have used in previous annual plan debates. The purpose of this is to suspend some of those items of standing orders for the purpose of allowing free-flowing discussion around the table to ensure that all councillors' views are able to be heard and that we're not curtailing the discussion and debate on the important matters that are before us today. So we are proposing to suspend the Standing Order 4.2 in relation to meeting duration, which will allow the meeting to extend beyond the normal 6-hour time limit, if needed, up to 8 hours. We're proposing to suspend Standing Order 21.2, which is around the time limits on speakers, so to remove the 5-minute time limit that applies in most circumstances, and also suspend 21.5, members may speak only once, so that allows councillors to speak on more than one occasion as we work through the debate. Relatively straightforward. Happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Any questions? Okay, so Stephen, you can leave the table. Do I have a mover for this resolution? Councillor Robinson. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Ward. All those in favour, please say aye. Any against? It's carried. Apologies, I should have asked for a debate, but thank you. So now we'll move to item 4.2, which is the report for council deliberations on the draft annual plan Mahere Atau 2026 to 2027. This is on page 7 of the agenda. Recommendations are on pages 7 and 8. And there is a separately circulated attachment of the community feedback, which is this very large piece of document. I'm not going to read it up on the table from the chair, but if anybody wants a copy, I do have another copy here. Amy Ellison, the Director, Strategy and Planning, Carmen Marsh, Organisational Performance Manager, Strategy and Planning, and Pip Moore, Principal Advisor, Organisation Performance, Strategy and Planning, will introduce this report. Please come forward. Need some CRC on this chair. Oh my goodness.
Morena tātou. Big day today. So welcome everybody to the deliberations of the annual plan for the Canterbury Regional Council 2026-27. So
The Deliberations report seeks your endorsement of 10 recommendations relating to the annual plan, and since it was adopted for community engagement in February. 4 of these recommendations seek Council's approval for changes to work programs and budgets. I don't need to tell you that this plan has been developed in an evolving central government landscape. Simplifying local government, resource management, funding changes. It's budget day tomorrow. Thursday. What day is it? Tuesday. Geopolitical pressures and the shocks that come with that. Also, there are high community expectations. I won't say like never before, but these are one of the times that our community is facing cost of living pressures and also general cost pressures, which as an organisation hits our business every single day in almost everything that we do. There is a cost to provide the services to the people of Canterbury. Despite the environmental changes, central government has indicated that all statutory requirements for the annual and long-term plan will remain in place under that Local Government Act 2002. Until we are told otherwise, we will continue. What I do need to say is, though, this, as always, we have taken a pro-BIC conservative approach, but no more so than this annual plan that we present to you. Since the annual plan was adopted for engagement, there have been additional context changes to the operating environment, as you know, and subsequently there have also been some amendments that will be suggested through that process. So Carmen will provide an overview of the development of the draft annual plan and the community engagement, and then Pip will provide an overview of the recommendations for council deliberation. If I could ask, if I may, councillors to hold their questions until we reach each relevant core service section, so the appropriate staff are in the room to respond. I wish you all well. Thank you. Carmen.
Good morning, councillors, and thank you, Amy. So I'm just going to very briefly recap on how we've got to where we are today with the development of the draft annual plan. So councillors will go back in time to November and December at the end of last year and February early this year when we talked to you about our recommended approach for developing the draft annual plan and received your guidance on what you wanted us to do. So noting that this annual plan 26-27 is year 3 of the long-term plan 2024-34. So the guidance we received from council at the time was to minimise any changes to the core service work programs and budgets from that we had put into year 3 of the long-term plan. It was also agreed in any changes agreed through the annual plan 25-26, which was year 2 of the long-term plan, be included as the starting point for this annual plan. In addition, we were directed to make no changes to outcome or service measures for 2026-27, so they remain the same as what they were for the long-term plan year 3. So as a result of that, we looked at any of the changes that we then brought forward into the draft annual plan, how that compared against guidance in the Local Government Act and Council's engagement, significance and Māori participation policy, and that determined that the changes weren't significant and we did not need to do a formal consultation process with the community. So on that basis, the Council adopted the draft annual plan on the 25th of February for engagement with the community, and that included a total proposed total rates revenue increase of 2.9%. So with the engagement process, we undertook that from the 27th of February to the 31st of March. We received 119 individual responses from the community, and that included a total of 365 what we're calling individual feedback points. So many of those responses talked to multiple items within the information that came back. overall, the feedback showed strong interest in Council's priorities. There was a consistent focus on balancing affordability with continuing to deliver the core services and achieving the right environmental outcomes for Waitaha Canterbury. So in addition to that feedback, the engagement campaign, we undertook the Kapa and Karero sessions in early May and had 35 people attend those sessions. There was a wide variety of discussions at those sessions, and it included items from public transport, service levels and funding, through to making sure we maintain our environmental protection work, pest management work, and a focus on flooding and land drainage and consenting. So a summary of the feedback that we received through the engagement campaign is provided at the end of the deliberations report. That's probably as much as I'm going to cover. We can take any questions on that later if you want to, but I'll just hand over Pip to recap what are the key recommendations for Council consideration today, Council decision today.
Thank you, Carmen. Kia ora, councillors. My name is Pip Moore. I'm a performance management advisor in the organisational performance management team in strategy and planning. So, as mentioned, there are 10 recommendations that are presented in the deliberations report. These are focused on targeted adjustments based on updated information since the engagement process and council decisions already made, as well as opportunities to improve efficiencies. 4 of the recommendations require council approval to change work programs. To change core service work programs and budgets. The first recommendation in environmental regulation and protection is to reduce the regulatory framework budget program expenditure. I will just flag for councillors that the values in the recommendation do not reflect the labour costs, so the values will be updated to a reduction in borrowing of $1.1 million, resulting in a $200,000 rate saving overall. I will assure councillors that the overall impact of that that is reflected in the deliberations report is not changed. We will still get to that 2.4% total rates revenue increase. It's just that it was an error in the actual recommendation. So moving on to community preparedness and response to hazards core service, there are 2 recommendations for council approval. The first is to increase investment in the flood and river resilience budgets, and the second is to tidy up the Regional Parks Reserve. And then 1 recommendation for the public transport core service to support the trial of additional direct service capacity between Rolleston and Christchurch, funded through targeted rates as already agreed in the annual plan 25-26. The remaining recommendations are procedural for noting or delegation, and if the council agrees today to the proposed recommendations, as I mentioned, it will result in a total rates revenue increase of 2.4%, which is a 0.5% reduction on the proposed rates increase that we engage with the community on. In addition to the deliberations report, staff have provided answers to specific councillor questions on the draft annual plan ahead of the deliberations today, and councillors will have received this information via the governance team. A reminder that today is the last opportunity for councillors to agree items to include in the annual plan, but the significance of any additional changes should be considered against the thresholds for triggering formal consultation. As Amy mentioned, as we go through each of the core service recommendations, we will have staff available in the room to answer any further questions that you may have. And that's all. Thank you. Happy deliberating.
Thanks for that. Amy, is there anything more?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say, actually, while we're sitting at the table, I really want to acknowledge my colleagues in finance, particularly, but also my fellow directors as well and their teams. Actually, this what sits before you is a full court press in terms of work and consideration, and so we offer that to you now for deliberation.
Thank you. So, so the way that we're going to do this is we've got 3 resolutions, 1, 2, 3, which are just receiving the report, agreeing that the starting point for the engagement was, if we can get those three resolutions up on the screen, was 2.9%, and then notes the final annual plan will be presented at the 24th of June. So if we can get those three resolutions out of the way, and then we can get into the body of the deliberations, and we're going to take each of the, moved by Councillor Sunkel and seconded by Councillor Mackay. Sorry, and you were slightly slow. But what we'll do is we'll get those three out of the way, and then we will go through each core service systematically. And then for amendments that people may want to have, bring those amendments so the staff will say something about that particular core service. Is that how you were going to do that? And then answer questions and anything like that needs to be done? Okay, and then we can go through the amendments. We may need to take some adjournments to work through those to get them on the screen in the way that people can then debate them, and then we will go through the other ones simultaneously. It's a bit of we'll see how it goes. There might be a bit of work to do. So if it's okay, we'll just leave the staff at the table at this moment, or do you want to leave the table because you'll get the staff for the environmental regulation and protection to come back? Okay, cool. Okay, so all those in favour of 1, 2 and 3? It was moved by Councillor Sunkel, seconded by Councillor Mackay. Okay, so that's carried. And so we'll now move into the environmental regulation and protection. So this is this is resolution number 4. Approves that the following changes to the regulatory framework program, the amount of expenditure. We'll just get that up on the screen if we can. Yes.
In taking amendments, can we decide what order we take them in? Simply because I'm aware of one possible amendment that is likely to come, that may mean I withdraw my amendment. But if we take my amendment first, this is kind of what I... Well, I'm aware there's going to be one in transport. Mm-hmm. And I want to put one in environmental regulation. But the reason I'm putting mine in environmental regulation, the reason I want to put that one is because we were starting from 2.4. I understand the transport one will take it way above that. And if that's passed, I will withdraw my environmental regulation one.
Yeah, I don't know how to...
I don't know.
I don't know really how to do that. I think we're just going to have to work through systematically. Hold on one second.
About increasing funding. Yeah.
I was going to ask the same. So we can ask questions. I'll just see if people do it.
So I was going to just...
100,000?
250. Or 100,000.
That's easy though, that one.
100,000?
No, because it's already saying
Okay.
it would save it, but we just keep it as
Keep it
is.
in.
It's 100.
Yeah.
It's quite a big chunk for some people.
Yeah, it is true.
So it's just an adjustment really of that recommendation. So we could keep the status quo.
But PT first. Oops.
Yeah, sorry.
We're just going to adjourn the meeting for 2 minutes. Okay, so we just had to just work through a procedural motion there to make sure that how we do the order of things. The order of things has to be done the way that they are put. So that means that we just need to go through systematically, one by one, and then councillors will have to just be mindful about where they're thinking about the bigger picture. But we'll just work through this as we can do it. So if we can get resolution 4 is on the screen here. What I need first to be able to open this up is a mover and a seconder for this item. Councillor Mackay and then Councillor Mackay. Megan Mackay and Claire Mackay. Yeah, and then so do I have any amendments that people want to put it? Because I understand there are amendments here.
I would like to see an amendment so that the 0.1 million general rate saving is not adjusted, so that it remains $100,000 of general rates and not a saving measure, but as a status quo.
And do you have a resolution that you have got written?
Yeah, I haven't actually written it because it came to my mind at the time, but Ashley and I would like to work through that together if we can come up to the table and adjust it.
Can we have an explanation again for the benefit of councillors at the table exactly what that savings is?
Okay. Can I please have staff? We've got a question. Can I please get staff to come and ask for a question of clarification?
The 1.1 million saving be redirected to increase the Y, and you can't do the postage by diversity.
No.
Kia ora, councillors. So I think the savings there mostly cover the planning budget, and it's money not borrowed. So, and it's interest saved from not borrowing that money.
So to clarify, a lot of the planning budget is funded through debt. So, as Lisa said, we're not going to open up that debt, so we don't need the additional money to service that debt. Lisa, would you like to just run through the reason why we're not going to draw down as much?
So the LTP had a budget that was set out that was to deliver a much broader work program that was required at the time the LTP was set under the RMA. The planning work that we are actually able to pursue over the next year is quite limited, and it's still kind of forming as well. So we've kind of asked for the same amount of money which we've spent in the last year, because we think it's the same sort of work program continuing rather than expanding greatly. We're just sort of maintaining capacity at the moment to be able to move into that new planning system.
Okay, I've got further questions. Councillor McKenzie and then Councillor Scott.
As I understood it, we spent quite a lot of money in the previous year on planning processes, and then the planning processes have now been told we don't require them. So presume there's more than $1 million worth of borrowing we don't have to do. So I think we need a fuller explanation of where we're spending. And I go back to point 21 in the paper, which says councillors agree there were no significant changes to the work programme, service measures or budgets for 26-27. Well, as my memory is that there was significant changes proposed because we didn't have to do the RPS, we didn't have to do any planning because the government has said no to all that stuff. So all the borrowing, which was in the tune of $30-odd million or something we were going to do over 3 years, there are significant chunks of money, not just $1 million, we shouldn't be spending.
So the budget from the LTP has gone from something like 13 million down for this year. Sorry, I haven't got the numbers right in front of me. Yeah, 30 million in the LTP down to, 16 million down to 13.8. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so we've gone from 16.4 in the LTP down to 13.8 in the draft annual plan, and then we've taken another $1 million off for those recommendations, another 1.1 million.
That's in the planning area. So what are we spending? Still spending another $12 million on planning in what area?
It's actually not all in planning. There's a component of it in the pest management plan and in the sort of ERP framework generally. But the planning, the actual planning budget, so the actual is something more like $4 million that covers labour and goods and services. Well, it's 3.8 million, but the rest of it I understand, and I might need some help from finance here, is debt servicing.
So you'll recall earlier this year, and there have been several briefings last year as well, talking through what the planning, what the planning chunk of this money has been spent on. So we have certainly briefed multiple times, because it's a good question, Councillor, and so we have done our best to provide that information. We provided certainly through in the preamble to the annual plan. One of the key things, though, so the issue is that, as Lisa has just said, this all comes under regulatory framework, but the actual part of planning which Lisa's team does is not the entire portion of whatever it is, 12 million. It is a portion of that. The portion of that, though, if we had continued on if we hadn't had a plan stop, would have been a lot larger, and we would have had to service a lot of debt. So we have provisioned for Lisa's team, which is not the pest management plan, which is not the other proportions of the environmental regulatory framework. We have not reduced that anymore, because you're aware we have regional spatial planning. And we actually need to retain the level of resource that we have to help our region deliver this key fundamental piece of work. And we are delivering 2 out of the 3 chapters ourselves, but also leaning into the TAs to ensure that they have the sufficient resource to deliver on their side as well.
Councillor Scott.
Look, can we get back to what's on the table here? We seem to be having a debate about this. But for me, the saving is an organic saving, because you're not borrowing. So therefore, the word saving is a bit of a misnomer. It should be a reduction in cost, because people see savings, they think they can spend them somewhere else. And I think that's not well written.
Councillor, so what we're doing is going to ask staff questions of this ERP, if there are questions around it. The Councillor Campbell.
This should be a very quick yes or no answer that should solve this. Can that not spent money be spent somewhere else?
Well,
No, because it's natural capital and it's debt saving. Sorry, debt.
Councillor Robinson.
So the natural capital side is actually quite separate to the $100,000 worth of general rates proportion. So that was my question, is they're actually quite separate, because we're not doing one service or one thing. The general rates proportion of it is a savings. However, I guess my concern or questioning is aligned with more about the expectations coming forward from the public of that expenditure. And so $100,000 of that, which is general rates, I was wondering if that could be earmarked for something within this portfolio.
Before I rudely interrupted you, Councillor, what I was going to say is that this money, this provision to spend, so it's not actually sitting there in a pot at the moment. We proposed, you approved, and we engaged on taking an amount of money through general rates for the purpose of servicing this debt. We are no longer going to draw down the debt, so we no longer need to service that debt. That was the purpose for which we were going to draw it down. So it's not actually sitting. It's not actually sitting in the bank. So I would say, and to your point, Councillor, yes, we should have. It's not really a saving. It is a reduction of the ask. So if you would like to ask for more money for something else, I wouldn't say it's related to this recommendation. It would be an ask to general rates for the purpose of which you would like to spend.
Okay, Councillor Megan Mackay.
Mine's been mostly answered, but I was just, you talked about the 4 million for the planning framework, and I was thinking we've got Plan Change 8 and also the regional spatial plan coming up, which is going to be a massive amount of work. So I was thinking, well, 4 million just would not cover that piece of work. But what I understand your answer to be is it's the preliminary stuff that needs to occur rather than the full cost of the planning framework. Is that correct?
Yes, so that's what we've budgeted for, is basically to have capacity to continue the work that we've been doing in the plan review so that we're ready to sort of feed that into the spatial plan when that starts to come together across the region, because it's not just us doing the spatial plan work, it's the TAs as well, so that will be a shared cost across the region. But there's still probably more discussion to go around how that cost gets shared.
Now, I just had a follow-up question, and it relates to some of the work that's coming through the Strategy and Policy Committee, and particularly the Regional Coastal Policy Statement. And what we've been told is that there's work that's still continuing in the background to go, what are the gaps in that plan and what do we need to fill, and that will bring forward to the new regional plan. And I just wanted confirmation that this budget still covers that work.
That's correct,
yeah. Just one further point of clarification, Councillor, to add to what Lisa has said. A lot of those processes that Lisa was talking about are over 2 years. So, and we're talking about the 26-27 portion. So a lot of the budgeting and the discussions for the 27-28 year will be undertaken through the long-term plan process. That's why it seems cheap.
Councillor Faulkner.
Thank you for that. That leads on to my question. The capital that we're not drawing down and incurring interest costs at the moment, and the regulatory framework, we're in a little hiatus period. So when, and I think, Amy, you indicated 27-28, is that when the increased drawdown is expected to come, and would that 0.2 million be wiped out quite easily?
Potentially, that will depend a bit on how we do cost sharing across the region to deliver the combined plan. So it's not a cost that's going to sit necessarily entirely with Environment Canterbury, but I think those discussions kind of have to mature a bit before we can sort of give you an idea of what it will cost in the following year.
Yeah, the sequencing of everything isn't particularly perfect, so there is a likelihood that we may have to come back sometime in the future and say, look, this is where the spatial planning is landing and this is the implications to that. But so nothing is landing up absolutely perfectly for that conversation just at this point in time. But we just need to be aware of that. That is something that will come. All right, well, I've got the questions. Is there any other questions that councillors wanted to ask? Okay, we can step back from the table again now. We've got, do I have any So has anybody got an amendment that they want to put forward? What's that?
I think because what we're proposing could be seen as a direct negative of this. I think it's a separate motion. I think after this, I think we would want to put another motion if that is possible.
So the problem is I don't know what those motions are.
Well, we can come up and have a chat.
So
No,
what I'm
okay.
going, if it's related to environmental regulation and protection,
Say what it is. Yeah.
you're
My concern is the element where it specifically says 0.2 million general rate savings. I don't think it's necessary in that particular recommendation, because what we have considered going forward is to have that amount potentially put forward to biodiversity funding. And so this is what the qualm is where do we put that, because we're both trying to think outside the box, and whether or not we have to wait for this to go through and to can have it considered or put it in now. So, some sort of...
It's part of the environmental regulation and protection, so I think it's the appropriate place is to put it here.
So,
the amendment will come in,
Yeah.
and then the amendment will then be debated. If it gets passed, then we will then go to the substantive, or then it will be added to the substantive. If it doesn't pass, then we'll be voting on the substantive. So if I can please ask, what is the amendment?
Well, I haven't written it yet, so that's when I have to consider...
Councillor, Sarah and Ashley, your things are mixed up, but Councillor Gerard?
Names.
Just wait.
Thank you.
Councillor Gerard?
I've been advised I should do this now. So this is to do with the non-regulatory item that was in the adjoining report. And so I would like to, it's with the purple willow that's growing as a mat on our braided rivers, and a significant adverse effect on our braided river geomorphology.
No, point of order, Mr. Chairman. We have a motion that's put in front of us.
There's been a point of order. Councillor Mackenzie.
Let me try and explain this very clearly so everybody understands. The motion that is in front of us is to accept that we won't have to borrow money to do some planning. It has nothing to do with biodiversity or anything else. This is purely, and if we disagree with this motion, then we're saying, well, let's borrow the money anyway, even though we've got nothing to spend the money on. It's a very simple motion, very clear intent. None of the debate or discussion that's coming from down the table here has anything to do with this motion. And as the chair of this organisation, you should understand the meaning of this motion, and you should be putting the motion and letting us vote on it.
I'm trying to give opportunities for people to add their amendments that they wanted to put in.
Purple willow is not an amendment. It's nothing to do with borrowing to reduce our planning exposure.
I'm just going to adjourn, because what's actually happening here is that the paper and the recommendations aren't written in such a way that it's actually enabling this to happen. So can I just adjourn for a few minutes and work this out? Okay, we will restart again. Councillors? Apologies for that, but our colleague Councillor Mackenzie has made a good point. We do need to take this motion as it stands. So the amendments that people want to will need to come in as a new motion. I will call for that new motion after this is taken. If it's not in writing, I'm not going to accept it. So, all those in favour of the amendment, of the motion that is in front of us, Environmental Regulation number 4, please say aye. Aye. All those against? Aye. It's carried. Do I have a new motion under the Environmental Regulation and Protection? Is that in writing?
I am busy putting it in writing right now so that it can be read.
No, I will accept it. It's been written. So we will adjourn for a couple of minutes to get this written so that it can be put onto the screen, and then we will debate that motion. Is that fair? Yes. And this is the last time. If it's not in writing in the email, I won't accept them. So we're adjourning for a few moments so that we can get. Thank you very much, everybody. While we work through this procedurally so that we get it right, we now have a motion by Councillor Campbell on the Environmental Regulation and Protection Core Service. The motion that has been put forward is on the screen, approves a one-off increase of $100,000 in contestable funding for a regional biodiversity fund to support greater number on-the-ground projects that support Canterbury Regional Council strategic direction. Moved by Councillor Campbell, seconded by Councillor Robinson. So I now need to open up for a debate on this. Should we get any advice on this? Are there any questions? I'll ask first if there's questions of staff about this before we move into a debate between council. Councillor Scott.
So if and when this gets approved, where does the money sit?
Councillor Campbell, or do we want to go to staff?
Oh, sorry.
That's open at the moment, but we are happy to specify funds if that is the desire. We don't want, as per the original emails that I sent to everybody requesting for information, the Christchurch and Banks Peninsula Biodiversity Fund is a targeted rate, and it's probably best to go to regional wide, which would be Y and CWMS.
Councillor Scott.
So is there any specific idea that has been generated behind the need for another $100,000?
I have read through the submissions, and overall from all sectors call for increased community funding for projects that support the environment. And that call came, even Federated Farmers was asking for increased local funding. It seems to be widespread. It's not a huge amount. We got information on the amount of money that wasn't allocated, even though it could have been allocated, and this is nowhere near that. So all I am doing is saying this is money that's not being spent on planning. So let's take a little bit of it and actually achieve some on-the-ground outcomes that we can achieve this year that won't actually hurt people's pockets much.
Councillor Scott.
Yeah, so there's two other questions I have. Is this Canterbury wide, should this be a targeted rate?
Canterbury wide.
Okay. Do I have any other questions of anybody of this? Councillor Mackay.
Two questions. Have you got a cost to implement the extra $100,000 as a contestable funding for regional wide biodiversity, given that this is not specific to anything?
Don't have a precise cost. What we did have in the information that we received 2 days ago was that $250,000, so 2.5 times this, would lead to a 0.1% rates increase. So divide that by 2.5 and multiply by 1, and we're looking at less than 0.5%.
Councillor Mackay.
A second question, have you considered that the funds may be more appropriate in our catchment implementation team?
No, I haven't. This is a response to the feedback that we got on the annual plan about a widespread desire for increased contestable funding, and that is why I started asking questions about it. My original intent was to go with the 250,000, which would have been quite significant, seen as we're looking at a decrease, as was outlined, or a saving, as was outlined before, of 0.2%. I think that half of that for contestable funding is a very modest ask, and it would have on the ground community impact Canterbury-wide.
Councillor Andrea Davis.
It's not really a question.
If it's
We
not a-
all,
if it's
well,
not a- if
we
it's not a-
believe.
Andrea,
I
if
have
it's not a
to-
question,
okay.
we'll wait.
Okay, I'll wait.
Okay, I'll open debate for this motion. I will start with Councillor Campbell as the mover.
I've said most of what I was going to say in answer to the questions. We all saw in the annual plan feedback a significant request community-wide from all sectors for increased community funding. We also got some information over the past 2 days about the amount of unsuccessful funds that met 75% or above of the criteria for the 2 funds that I asked about. And this wouldn't actually cover all that amount, but it would cover some of it. I also, and to make sure that I had my reading of the community right, I went out on social media over the past couple of nights saying to people, what would you prefer, a 2.4% increase or using that money for increased funding for contestable funds? I got one response that I think was keep it at 2.4, but I'm not too sure because it wasn't particularly clear. And about 5, there wasn't a huge amount of commenting, but all 5 other comments were 2.9% increase in community funding. There is a huge desire from our community to do good and to put in their own labour, sometimes some of their own money as well, to actually improve our environment. This is a very small amount in the scheme of things, less than a 0.5% impact on rates, and yet $100,000, if we look at, we could do 3 projects at 30,000 and 2 at 5,000. It could have a significant impact in communities. Very significant impact for very small amount of money, and our community wants it.
Councillor Mackenzie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've got real problems with this as a proposal. Contestable funds are a highly inefficient way of disposing money, and it's unlikely you'd get any demonstrable gain from $100,000. And I think what Councillor Campbell is muddling up is her community's values as opposed to other people's community values. And I note that out of the submissions to the annual plan for the Selwyn District Council annual plan, there are nearly 500 submissions. Over 70% of them were consistently against community fund, consistently for cutting back on community funding projects, cutting back on a whole lot of projects to get their rates demands back in context. I can tell you that the Ashburton community sympathises with those views. So to claim that community values are on basis on, I think there were 160 submissions to our annual plan, I'm guessing that Ashley's community response is based on Christchurch. So if this was a targeted rate for Christchurch, I would set aside. But if it's going to be a region-wide rate, I oppose it. I don't think our ratepayers want this. They want us to cut back our expenditure.
Councillor Davis.
I think this is a good idea, only because we already have the framework set up to do contestable funds. We know that there were people who missed out in the last round. We know that on the ground, I know that for $1 we give to Banks Peninsula Conservation Trust, they can make that stretch 3 times. So we know that, I feel that this is money well spent on the ground. And as we go through all this reform, one of the things that we heard is that all 44% are, they submitted on ERP. So people are concerned about the environment. Maybe it's just because they're getting all this on social media. They're worried. They're also worried about the cost of living. So it's a balance, but I do support it. And it can go to catchment. It's Canterbury-wide. So it can go to catchment groups. And if we don't spend it, great. We don't spend it.
Councillor Sunkel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I speak against this amendment or new motion. Back in the day, we would, in annual plans and consultation have a list of requests from community across the board, 10,000, 30,000, 50,000, 100,000. And we moved to a point where we agreed that we would have a bulk contestable fund to take this very debate away from a council chamber where we were debating on individual requests for monies, simplify the process and allow for some criteria to be set and funds allocated. There will always be a desire. There will never be enough money. Everyone wants more. But we have set a value, we have set criteria, and those at the top of the order have been granted those funds that they require, and others have unfortunately missed out. So I genuinely don't believe that we end up accepting a creep of more funds going into a contestable fund. So I speak against it. We have a process, we put it in place to try and get away from this debate at appropriations in a sense. So I'll leave it at that.
Councillor Robinson and then Councillor Scott.
I find it really difficult to keep having these conversations about biodiversity. It's like a fight at every annual plan. We always talk about the least regrets, and this is my and Councillor Campbell's tiny little pluck into the air of least regrets with $100,000. We're reducing our regulation from a central government level to a local government level, and biodiversity and conservation is always the end consideration. That doesn't sit well with me, and it definitely didn't sit well with the community who actually bothered to consider coming into our rooms here and discuss with us, often at great length, about what their area is missing out with. And it's not just here in Christchurch. We've opened this up to the entire region, so don't tell us that it's about our own communities, because it's not. I think about everything from the mountains to the sea when I consider this, and don't get me started on coastal, because I could have actually put in a heck of a lot more for that. This is about everyone who came here and discussed, often with emotional intention and voice, to say how their community, their environment, their river is missing out on those tiny little throwaway coins of what we have to deal with now. 2.54% or 2.9%, that's a massive reduction, and the environment is the losing factor. So least regrets, $100,000 for the entire region using either the Y Fund or the CWMS profile to run this. I can't see how it is such a confusing, contestable issue. We mean well by doing this. We're trying to be inclusive of everybody and everything. And I strongly support it. And that's my last thing. But yeah, the environment shouldn't miss out every time we have these debates.
Councillor Scott.
Yeah, thank you. Look, I have some sympathy for your position on this, but it's predicated on a funding stream, that $200,000 we've just talked about, and I don't consider that everyone's gone to a different finance school that considers it a saving rather than a reduction. So in that manner, I would not support this. I'm not sure in terms of supporting Councillor Mackenzie's thing, how many people up the Whakatau Mere Valley are going to benefit from $100,000 in the community fund, or someone in Cattle Creek. That's the question I'm asking. So I don't think that South Canterbury people will get a huge benefit. I'm sure that you'll have a lot of people face this contestable funding from the city and from Banks Peninsula, like they always have done. But my parsimonious self today, I'm reluctant to actually put any more money in the pot than the staff recommendation. I must admit the staff have done such a good job on this. I think this is my 10th one, and I think it's probably the best one in terms of the advice that we've been given. So thank you.
I've had 3 for and 3 against. I'm inclined to put the motion, but does Councillor? But as the mover of this motion, I am going to ask Councillor Campbell to wrap up this debate.
I'm just going to read a few things from the email that we received yesterday of outlining what didn't get funded, what could have got funded. Of applications that received an alignment score of 75% or above, 26 were unsuccessful due to insufficient funds. Y Fund 24 projects, amount requested 471,795. CWMS Fund 2 projects, amount requested 11,850. I'll also read you some of the notes that I made when I read through all the submissions that were made to us on the annual report. Federated Farmers, more money for local action and support. Prioritise partnerships with community groups. Treat as a core service. Multiplication effect through volunteers. These contestable funds provide for local action for groups like ours. Those were the comments that I made that directly influenced me to go for a one-off increase in funding, not continuing through future years, just for the next year.
Okay, we'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against? Aye. A division has been called.
The division, Councillor Robinson,
Yes.
Councillor Megan Mackay,
For.
Councillor Claire Mackay,
No.
Councillor John Faulkner,
No.
Chair Swiggs,
For.
Councillor Campbell,
For.
Councillor Nick Moody,
For.
Councillor Peter Scott,
Against.
Councillor Ian Mackenzie,
Against.
Councillor Andrea Davis,
For.
Councillor Nick Ward,
Against.
Deputy Chair Yayan Cranwell, online. Councillor Cranwell,
Right.
not no microphone. Councillor Cranwell. Not sure if he's there. We'll continue on. Yes, Councillor Joe Davies.
Yeah.
Oh,
On the Saturday. Yeah.
that was
Do you want anything at duty free?
Councillor Cranwell. Is that for?
Yeah, it was.
Everyone
It was
hear that?
for.
Sorry, I missed it. Councillor Davies,
Yes.
Councillor Lamont online,
Against.
Councillor Gerard,
For.
Councillor Sunkel,
Against.
Just a point of order before we count those votes, Chair. I'm not happy with the Councillor Cranwell reply because I'm not sure, in my own opinion, that he knew what we were talking about.
I heard him say for.
Yeah, but did he know what we were talking about?
That's up for the member, but he said for.
nine.
Okay, so the motion's carried 9-7-4. Do I have another? I understand that there's one more motion that has been put by Councillor Gerard. Can I please have that up on the screen?
Yes. Now, underneath that, and type the next one. Can we just take a moment to type it, please? We don't have it. Ready? Do you want for 1 minute to get that on the screen, or do you want to carry on?
We'll just carry on. Okay, so we've got we'll tidy it up afterwards, but we've got a resolution here, a motion that's been put by Councillor Gerard, that lift the funding of the Land and Water team to carry out collaborative delivery and identification, scoping and delivery of purple willow control as targeted non-regulatory intervention. Do I have, is anybody going to second that motion from Councillor Gerard? So the question that I have here is by how much? Because there is no number here, and we can't really. I'm not really willing to accept a motion without a number. Councillor Gerard, can you speak to this?
200,000.
Do I have anybody who has questions? So do you want to put lift funding for 200,000 for the Land and Water team? Is that what you're saying? Wait.
Yes, it's really, I mean, I'd need advice about whether it should be the Land and Water team or a biosecurity team, but I think the Land and Water team would be, could really have the resources to do it.
I've got does anybody from the Land and Water team here to speak to this? Because I've just had a question asked by the member of her own resolution or motion. Can I please have that answered?
Kia ora. It would be a reprioritisation of the work they're currently doing. Anything's possible with the existing resources, but it means other stuff wouldn't happen while we led a project with this regard. So that's just reshuffling.
So may I ask, is this even something that you can do?
In the advice we circulated, which was developed by Lee and myself yesterday in the additional documentation, we did say there's a question here about understanding the issue for a start and an investigation, which would be somebody independent of Environment Canterbury, given it involves other districts as well. So that was our preferred advice. I'm not sure at the moment, with it only being focused on purple willow, I'm unable to confirm whether we could do that.
So may I ask, is this something better placed for the long-term plan?
If we did that original investigation and scoping and understanding, I think we would then have a case to put into the long-term plan. It's kind of a step too far.
I've got a few questions. Can I get councillors who have got questions of staff to ask here? So I'm going to start with Megan Mackay and then Councillor Ian McKenzie. Those are the first two I saw.
Great, thank you. So in the pre-distributed report, it talks about 242,000 being deployed across Canterbury, and that any lift in funding will enable more collaborative delivery of on-ground actions. So my question's two parts. One, 200,000 in addition, would that be in addition to this 242 that lifts the whole budget to 442 is my first question. My second question is, purple willow, is it considered by staff to be one of the biggest biosecurity risks?
So my understanding from what's proposed is this would be additional money to the current scheduled budgeted 242,000 goods and services we have. Obviously, the work of Water and Land is not just delivering pest control or biodiversity. It's also about engagement with communities, activities to engage on good management practice, field days, etc. So intensive winter grazing, etc. So that's where I'm just saying that 242 isn't looking at one particular pest species. Yeah.
Sorry, do you have a further question, Megan?
Well, I have my second question. I think maybe I didn't quite ask that right, but what you've answered is that this is a substantial, like this is doubling that budget. Yeah. Okay. And my second question was, the purple willow issue, and maybe I don't know if it's for you or who it is, but how big is this issue? And are you saying that we don't know yet because we need to do this investigation? So
this willow issue is of concern as other pest willow species for Canterbury, both from a biodiversity threat perspective and also in our river management. It's not a unique Environment Canterbury issue. It does involve other landowners and agencies. So that's where in the advice report we sent through yesterday, I think you got it, we had suggested a bit of an investigation stock-take to collaboratively with others, so because it isn't just a Environment Canterbury issue, to it as a good first step. But it is of concern to the biodiversity of our.
I just had the CE wanted to, acting CE wanted to make a comment as well, and then I'll come to Councillor Mackenzie.
As councillors are aware, we've also initiated the review of the Regional Pest Management Plan, which of course will go through and assess all of the pests and issues facing Canterbury, and that will go through its process of evaluation against species and action required. So yes, that is a couple of years away, but obviously this will be a species that will be accounted for through that process, in which the investigations and the advice with regard to investment to control this could be brought forward.
Councillor Mackenzie.
Well, look, David and Councillor Mackay sort of asked the question I was going to ask, and David has sort of answered it. But the reality is that this is a pretty bloody stupid way of going about trying to establish whether a pest is a pest and where it sits in the priority of our funding requirements. As I understand it, talking to our rivers team, purple willow can be a problem, and it's alongside a huge number of other exotic weeds, especially in our riverbeds, but in other places. I think in the first instance we need to get some advice before we start voting on whether we want to go after a problem which may not be much of a problem and may not affect us or our ratepayers that much, when there are a lot of other weeds and pests that we should be targeting. So we need to do some homework on this before we start voting.
All right, we're asking questions at this point in time. Is there any other questions? Peter Scott, Councillor Scott, did you have a question? Okay, Councillor Mackay.
Two questions, if I may. The scoping cost, approximately, if you wanted to do the scoping cost, something.
Apologies for cutting you off there, Councillor Mackay. We had suggested that $40,000 could get us a good piece of work as scoping, so significantly less money than being proposed through this resolution.
And secondly, given that it touches on a number of areas in our organisation, including obviously rivers, and then the biodiversity perspective, I'm just wondering, and it might be something for the remover to consider, would we be better to lift our area team, if we were, to the catchment implementation team, which would cover, as I understand it, the biodiversity, biosecurity, and land and water, and the rivers possibly touching in there too.
This would be, and through you, Chair, this would be I think we need to take an organisational response, so tying it quite tightly to one particular team, I'm not sure it's an operational decision at the end of the day.
Who has further questions? Councillor Campbell.
The 40,000 that you mention here as a joint investigation, could that come from existing funding within the next year, including possibly calling on reserves? Like, what I'm asking is, could we take this issue to a normal council meeting and get the 40,000 reallocated from existing funding, or would that be difficult?
There's always the opportunity to reprioritise where we spend money. I'm not sure this could come out of reserves, especially pest management reserve, because it's not actually a declared pest. So I don't think that would be an option, but I would have to check on that aspect. Yeah.
Councillor Robinson and then Faulkner.
I'm actually just looking at the braids information and the partnership Environment Canterbury has within developing sort of more information on the willow control. And it's quite up to date. And it's through the Braided River Revival Boom Transition Project. So it does specifically talk about the Ashley and the Waimakariri sort of area and that catchment. It seems to be semi-resolved to the point that you've got a strategy going forward and some funding allocated to that. Is there an area maybe that needs the scoping work for that rather than just holistically looking at a scope for everything? Because half of it is within that, I guess, plan, the transition report. So my question would be to you is there any funding that's needed to scope particular catchments or rivers going forward that we could address this to?
There is a threat to wetlands as well as braided rivers. It's not just braided rivers, so that's possibly why the scope would be broader than just the in-river effect, if we think of it as a biodiversity threat. I don't know if that helps answer the question, but I think it's a good thing to think of it in relation to the existing work that's already underway.
Councillor Faulkner.
Oh.
Thank you, Judith. I understand collaborative delivery in the identification. The rest of it, I haven't got a clue what that means. Scoping and delivery as a targeted non-regulatory intervention. What does that mean? It doesn't mean anything to me.
Ask the mover.
Pardon?
Ask the mover. Councillor Gerard, do you have
Can you explain that, Sarah?
The collaborative is working with other organisations like DOC and LINS who own rivers and
I understand that part. What I don't understand is the scoping, delivery and targeted non-regulatory.
the identification is where, and scoping is actually where the rivers, which rivers are under threat. So where is it? Is it up near Beeley, where some river control works has been carried out and some planting there? Also, the what is in our nursery, because this has come from our nursery. This is our problem. We've came from the North Island, but it's been used for river control works. Is that right? Yeah.
Councillor Gerard, I'm just going to ask the staff to make a comment.
The invasion of purple willow, the cause of it is not yet currently known. Multiple TAs as well as Environment Canterbury plant various species of willow. I don't think it's accurate at this time to say it came from an Environment Canterbury source.
Thank you for that. Yeah, and so in the delivery is we've got to get we've got to carry out action. So I'm thinking, this spring, hopefully, we can start our program of control. So the sooner we get onto this problem, the better, because
Councillor Gerard,
it will be spreading.
There's still questions to ask. I have Councillor Scott and then Davies and then Mackay.
So thank you. Look, my question is that consideration of this as a pest in terms of the review of the regional pest management strategy, there would have to be a look at, if it was a pest, what's the extent of it, the things that Councillor Gerard's talking about. And then there is the opportunity in terms of doing that work to actually put a program in place or put wings around a program that can start controlling this. But the first thing we have to identify is a pest. I mean, it's not a pest down in our end, south of Waimakariri. Have never heard of it before, actually. So is it a significant pest in terms of rivers? And I'm no doubt that it has in terms of the circumstances that you're talking about it. That is seen as that. So I think that in your planning process, from my point of view, answer the question, Jude. Do you think during the regional pest management plan review we can look at this pest as a pest?
I mean, there's a great big long list of pests that'll be looked at, and I'm sure that I don't know for sure whether this is in that list. I suspect it will be. How it then fits into that regional pest management plan framework will have to be worked through that process. But we need some information to inform that.
Follow up. So, is it appropriate that that can be done internally through the Rivers team, rather than actually getting an independent person to go out and assess this? Sorry, Lee, I just took your button off you.
The Rivers team works very collaboratively with the biodiversity biosecurity teams in regards to the purple willow, particularly in the berm transition braided river revival space, which was mentioned by previous councillors. Our staff have skills in this area. However, I would recommend that an independent biosecurity expert be contracted to deliver this work if council was minded to include it in the work program.
Councillor
In regards to the 40K I'm talking about.
Yeah, so that would be the 40,000. So may that be, would Councillor Gerard be open to a slight change to the amendment to have that 40,000 towards that joint investigation as a starting point?
It's actually a motion, Councillor Davies. But
Yeah, I guess I would like to ask the question is really how, is there scope that we can get on and deliver on site, in this financial year? So it's really asking whether we can, have contractors starting the control works.
Thank you, Councillor. Through you, Chair. In the information you were provided yesterday, we did provide an option to increase on the ground work to the value of 225K. We included that because the work we currently carry out in this area between the Rivers and Catchment Implementation team is scalable. So we would effectively be spending more on contractors, doing more spraying, more on-ground interventions, similar to what we've done in the Ashley in this last season. The costing for that was at 75K. We believe we could do 3 rivers. That would be 2 spray passes in a spray season. The first one 50K, the second one 25K. So we were asked for that information, so we have put that on the table. Were councillors minded to also fund on-ground works as an interim measure to understanding the issue as well?
Councillor Mackay, do you have a question?
Just with two staff, if I may, with regard to the cost or scoping cost of the 40,000 that was mentioned, that could potentially be funded out of the pest management review if it was one of the pests that was looked at for the pest management.
I think the pest. Sorry, through you, Chair. It would be what we'd proposed here would have been advice in this document would have been slightly different to what would be done under a pest management review, because it would look at where the pest is, etc., and perhaps look at recommendations on the best approach to addressing the issue going forward, whereas the pest management review would have a much more narrow scope of looking at the pest and its impact versus its geographical spread. Where would you start from an implementation point of view?
So, second question with regards to the implementation and upscaling that you're talking about. Currently, as I understand it, we do some pest spraying in rating areas. Is the suggested uplift outside rating areas, or does it include rating areas as well?
Exactly what 3 rivers would be done is yet to be decided. It would be outside of rating areas as well as inside, because I believe you target the headwaters of the rivers to stop the spread. So it would be a bit of both.
Councillor Moody.
Thanks. Yep, interesting conversation all around. I'm not very comfortable with council picking winners and losers as a general principle. I think governance, we set the direction and leave the detail to staff. And you saw that when Councillor Scott suggested money for wallabies. I said, well, I'm not going to support that. I want the staff to bring a paper saying, if we uplift in this biosecurity area, what do staff recommends the most important pest? And they said wallabies. I said, okay, I'll support it. So if this was an uplift for biosecurity funding in general, then, you know, I'd be quite comfortable with that. Yeah, I'm not so comfortable with us picking a winner and a loser here. I mean, can it be...
Do you have a question?
Question for staff would be, can it be... oh, sorry, I thought we were in debate. We're still in questions.
We're questions.
Oh, apologies. It's gone on. Are we able to bring it to the pest management review working group to look at this topic and around the Purple Willow and invite Councillor Gerard and get staff advice and still be able to spend 40k, after that?
If council would like us to go out of this forum and have further conversations, that's always a possibility. I guess the question will be where the 40k comes from, given the existing budgets are allocated. So that would be new work. So something would be deferred, etc.
Do I have any further questions of staff here? I've got Councillor Robinson and then now Councillor McKenzie.
Sorry, I won't go on, I promise. Just looking at, I guess, it's in between what Councillor Scott said and Moody. I think the pest side of it is the avenue and the biodiversity, because from what I'm seeing at a national level, it needs to be actually controlled at a national level. It's a self-seeding, wilding issue that is getting bigger and bigger. And no matter, even if you have a single-sex version of the tree, it still wants to wild, and it's quite an amazing thing when you look at it. However, does it need to be more controlled at a centralised level like wild and conifer? Or, would this, with $40,000, would that actually organise ourselves at a regional level to actually control it enough to make a difference, do you think?
Part of the reason for suggesting the approach of doing that sort of scoping investigation stage was understanding the scale of the issue and the extent or the impact of it. So it would be partly to inform that thinking, so that you could then have a more clarity and understanding what would it cost to control, as well as the fact that there would be, is it included in the pest management plan, etc.
Councillor McKenzie.
Listen carefully to the discussion. Nobody seems to understand the scale of the problem and just how bad the weed is, though they understand that it is becoming invasive. What I can't understand is you're saying you need $40,000 to decide whether this is a problem or not, but in fact, if in your normal course of work, so Lee in your case in Rivers, or Brett in terms of delivering pest management across the weed and pest management across the region, presumably if there was a new invasive weed, you would address that within your current budgets and within your current strategy and policies. So what I'm not sure about is why, to be able to at least understand the problem, how purple willow ranks amongst our exotic weeds, why you need another $40,000, or is that just a sop to the mover of the motion?
I guess the answer to the question is purple willow is a problem. It's a growing problem. We don't understand how big a problem it is, and it seems to be spreading north to south. So what our teams are doing on the ground, and the Ashley is a good example, is it's just sort of got in there. So at key sites only, not whole spread, the team has taken some action, particularly when it's in the flood scheme, to try and stop its spread, because it fills up islands, it locks in flow and causes all sorts of other issues, as well as natural character issues. The question of the $40,000 was around independence. If your question is, can we repurpose other budget, such as doing less on the ground, say next financial year do 40k less on the ground and instead spend it on this investigation in collaboration with others, because this is not just an ECAN issue, the answer is yes.
the first part of your answer was, actually, we're dealing with this at the moment as business as usual, in which case we don't need to increase any funding in the first instance until we've had a report back from you as to a more measured approach to how we would deal with this, what might be a new and invasive weed. Wouldn't that be a better approach than a sort of going back to Councillor Moody's things, which is sort of trying to pick winners and losers and arbitrarily picking on weeds and thinking, well, let's have a go at cracking this one?
I think the answer to your question through you, Mr. Chair, is that we are dealing with what we can on the ground within existing budgets. What we can propose as staff as an alternative is that we spend $40,000 on something less, and Jude and I can figure out what that is between us, and instead put it towards this investigation if that's another option the council would like to look at. The impact of that being there would be no impact on the draft annual plan.
Okay, Councillor Robinson, did you still want to have that question? Because I want to put this motion.
Probably the question being is that would we communicate our findings well enough? Because, you know, I see that TAs and NZTA even plant a lot of willows in their control works. And so if our findings are relayed strategically to others and make sure that they also understand the gravity of what we're looking at, I do support that. I'm sorry, it wasn't really a question in the end.
Okay.
But,
all right.
yeah.
You can, staff, thank you very much for us keep answering these questions. You can step back from the table. We now need to move to debate on this. Can we please be disciplined on the debate? I'll start with Councillor Gerard as the mover. Councillor Gerard?
Microphone.
The motion has been put and it's been moved and seconded. It now needs to be taken as it is.
Okay, I'll speak to it then. Purple willow, I have done my homework, and it grows as a mat on the braids of the braided rivers, and it has significant adverse effects on the geomorphology, the gravel movement, our flood resilience is related to that, and to the ecology, as well as it will probably change the natural recharge of groundwater. So it's a significant change, and it's not only that I've heard from the local communities that are concerned about it, but also I went out with a river engineer 2 weeks ago, and that's when I really started to concern about it, because out in the middle of the Waimak was a big island covered in it. It was just a sward. And he pointed out, he said, this is a real problem. We didn't think it would end up in the Waimak, and it has. And he said it was likely to be 30 k's upstream, and it's in dock in Lindsland as well. So it's really hard to control, and they need a collaborative effort to do it. And it needs to go from the mountains. It could be up in Beeley's Spur for all we know. It's sort of like we've got to get an idea of what we're dealing with, and then get underway with our control, because it'll be throughout the rivers. It will just keep making its way down from the north to south. So I think it's an issue that is man-made, and we need to deal with it. And I certainly thank staff for their help with this, because it was very last minute. But I think, I really appreciate the work they've done. And so I think there does need to be 40,000 for the scoping, but also I think we need to get underway with the collaborative effort of a program of control, whatever that may be, that the experts have put forward for us, and how best to control it. But I think it has to start this spring. Thank you.
Councillor Davies.
Yeah, just support Sarah on this, and I think it's definitely within the right of a councillor to raise an environmental concern and the kind of the seriousness which she gives it. I support her work on this. As seconding this amendment, I'm still a little bit unclear about process here, because we had a number put in, the number was removed, we've asked questions, and then it's been considered that it's been moved, so now I've gone into debate. I just hope that if this does carry, that is seen to be the $40,000 towards a joint investigation, so that work can be done before other spending can be done on the delivery side of it. I'm not sure if that can be interpreted like that by our chief executive, but that's where we are.
Councillor Mackenzie, and then Sunkel, then Scott.
Look, I don't dispute that the purple willow is yet another exotic weed that is going to cause problems for our environment or our river management teams. But I just think that if we're going to be coherent in the way we operate as a council, we need to go through coherent processes, and bringing individual motions like this to our annual plan discussions without actually having had any scope, any discussion, any recommendations from staff about how they would best deal with this issue, it seems to me to be half-cocked, and so I'm going to vote against this motion. But that doesn't mean to say that we shouldn't be taking action to deal with purple willow. But I think we just need to do that in a coherent and thought-out and well-planned system, not a schizophrenic approach, which this is.
Councillor Sunkel.
I echo the words of Councillor Mackenzie. There is a process in my mind that this should have over time been brought to ERP or to the community preparedness and the rivers team for a conversation. That it has not been brought to prominence in either of those core services suggests to me that the issue is not that significant in the minds of our staff in the interim. And so I will vote against it. Again, as Councillor Mackenzie has said, not opposed to us pursuing and understanding the issue of purple willow. But if we are going to do such things, we need a process. It should go through a process, debate, discuss, understand, and then work our way forward, not just drop something on an appropriations day.
Councillor Scott.
Yeah, to be fair to Councillor Gerard, she has raised this at the appropriate places, and but I think this is really poor governance on our behalf if we go ahead with this, and I think it's a poor channel to be using for pests, and I think we're in a really poor process. That's how I feel about this. I think there are processes and there are avenues to exploit this as a pest, and the Regional Pest Management Review is one of those places. I would be really strongly advising staff to go and find $40,000 and do the investigation rather than us have to sit here and discuss this. It's brought us to our attention, and I think that we should be urging staff to look at a channel that they can get this money on and then come back with some more advice, because we're in the dark a bit here in terms of what we're trying to do.
Councillor Davis.
Yeah, I mean, the process probably is not perfect, but I want to thank Sarah for bringing this up, because it's like the wallabies and the wildings. It's another W. And if we jumped on those things immediately and not debated it, we would have probably saved some money. So thank you for bringing it up. And I feel heartened that Lee and her team and Judith, that they are aligned and they do things together, because it's important. So let's just hope that if this fails or if it goes through, we now know we've got to do this. We've got to do it this year.
Are you speaking in favour or against?
I will support.
Okay, so I've had 3 for and 3 against. I'm going to put the motion. Do you have? I've got a right of reply of Councillor. Yes.
How do staff actually calculate the impact on rating? I just wonder, how do staff calculate rating impact without a dollar figure in there?
I understand, but the motion has been put and it's been seconded and we've debated it and we've got to now put the motion. So all those in favour, please. Councillor Gerard, you have a right of reply.
Thank you for the opportunity for this debate and to put this forward. I think for me, it's time is not on our side. So that's why I really wanted to put the funds forward now, and that that our communities know that we are proactive and getting on and looking after our biosecurity and our rivers and biodiversity, as the submitted really stressed in their submissions. Thank you.
Okay. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
All those against? I think that's lost. Can I
Yeah.
Can I please, all those in favour, please say aye. Put your hand up.
What about the
5. What about online?
And online? Councillor Lamont and Cromwell?
Against.
Against.
It's lost. Okay, we will move on to to our next core service. Community preparedness in response to hazards. This is recommendation 5 and 6. We've got Lee Griffiths and Jesse Burgess who are able to come to the table. Has anybody got any questions of staff on this recommendation 5 and 6?
I should have shown it to you first.
No, it doesn't seem to have anybody's got any questions. So thank you very much. Can I please have a mover and a seconder for this motion? Moved by Councillor Mackenzie and seconded by Councillor Sunkel. Councillor Mackenzie, can you please open the debate?
I think, well, as far as I'm concerned, that as read, the staff have provided very good reasonings for the extra requirement for borrowing $2 million on the Waimak flood scheme. It's a critically important piece of infrastructure for Canterbury. They don't bring recommendations to spend $2 million on it just out of a whim. This is clearly work that is required. Nobody in Christchurch will thank us if we don't spend that money.
Councillor Sunkel, who is the seconder? Councillor Sunkel.
Thank you, and I think too the conversations with the river liaison groups right across Canterbury, the work that has been done there, and the acceptance of what is required. So I'm just more than happy to second this.
Any further debate on 5 and 6? Okay, well I'll put this motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Any against? That's carried. I have not received any other motions on this. I'm going to move forward to the public transport, which is recommendations 7 to 9. Can we please take a couple of minute adjournment so that we can just charge our glasses and we'll come right back, please. Please. So we're moving to items recommendations 7 to 9. We have Giles, who is available for Giles, Stuart Gibbon, and Sonia Pollard, I think, for questions to be asked of this. Do I have questions of anybody of staff of these recommendations? Councillor Sunkel.
Thank you. Can I please have an explanation of what the 0.81 million public targeted rate increase for Rolleston achieves?
So in previous annual plans and LTPs, Council has agreed to a targeted rate to provide additional services between Rolleston and Christchurch. This funding would be used, given the results of the Bentley trial, to support the much needed capacity on the link between Rolleston and Christchurch.
Councillor Mackenzie.
So that 0.81 million is targeted rate from the Selwyn, those people within the Selwyn, or just Rolleston?
It'll be the targeted rate for the Greater Christchurch part of Selwyn.
Greater Christchurch, or greater just the Rolleston part?
Yeah, the Selwyn part of Greater Christchurch.
And so what is the cost per rating unit for that?
I don't have that figure in front of me, sorry. It's money that was already approved, that we originally withdrew from the draft plan, the draft annual plan that went out for consultation because the trial was ongoing, with a clear indication that should the trial not be continued into 26-27, that we would seek to reintroduce that funding.
Is there any scope to change the fare structure on those, to put a higher proportion of the cost on the users rather than on the ratepayers?
So two things. Obviously, this council has already agreed to introduce zones again once NTS is fully implemented. So that will come. And then council has agreed that it will review fares on an annual basis. We will be bringing a paper later in the year to full council for a decision on rate structures from February next year.
So when's the soonest that the rates, then the fares could be changed for that Rolleston to Christchurch service?
Council can change the fare structure at any time it wishes to, in terms of, but that has, so can change the fares at any time it wishes to. Council agreed that it would do that on an annual basis. So our intention is that we would be bringing a paper with a new recommended fares from February next year at the start of the academic year, and in line with the approach taken in Greater Wellington and Auckland. In terms of the zones, that will be introduced after NTS has gone live fully with full functionality, which is expected to be later this year. So that will reintroduce the zones that we had previously, which means there will be a differentiated fare between people who travel from Zone 2, which is mainly Selwyn and Waimakariri, and those travelling in Zone 1, which is obviously Christchurch primarily.
Councillor.
Just one last question on procedure. Are you moving recommendation 7 separately to the other ones?
If you would like 7 moved separately, I'll do that. Okay. Councillor Scott.
Oh, yeah, before I start on this, please forgive me if I should know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask you anyway. But it's about 8 regarding total mobility and the maximum fare cap. Is that a fare cap per trip that's there?
Yes.
Sorry, thank you for that. And one of the other issues that I guess that we had debated a lot during the last triennium was the ability, the criteria for receiving the ability to have a total mobility services card. Has that changed at all?
Ministry of Transport haven't finished their review and published the outcomes of that process yet.
So I guess our concern at that stage was it was reasonably open-ended in terms of your opportunity to. Is there any suggestion that could tighten?
Any other questions of the staff? Okay. Oh, Councillor Mackay.
I was just trying to find the point regarding the fact that in the annual plan that draft went out, we did take out the funding, I think it was for 5 and 1. Given the context that we're now in subsequent to that with fuel shortage, etc., and the increased patronage that's been used on our buses, is there an opportunity to perhaps look at how we might incorporate that route uplift in?
So work is ongoing on the business case to support Route 1 and 5. That is expected to go to NZTA for a decision in August. And Council will then need to make decisions on whether it wishes to proceed with those, dependent on A, whether NZTA approves the business case, and B, whether they approve any funding to support that, because they could approve the business case but still not provide their share.
Any further questions? Okay. I'm going to ask for 7, 8 and 9 to be moved as together. So I'm going to ask Councillor Davies to... I'll move them separate. I'll ask them to be voted on separately, but as a block they'll be moved and seconded. So Councillor Davies moved. Councillor Sunkel has seconded. So what we'll do is we'll debate it as a lot, and then we can... We've been asked if item 7 can be voted on separately, but we'll debate the whole package as a whole package. So can I ask Councillor Davies to open the debate?
Shall we dismiss the officers first?
Oh, sorry. Yes, sorry, staff. You can step back.
Don't want to debate with them.
Good point, Councillor Davies.
Great. So, just regarding 7, the broader Ralston-Christchurch corridor represents a fast-growing commuter demand in our region, and the withdrawal of Bentley's confirms that the market is there, but it cannot sustain itself without public investment in this corridor. The money earmarked here, which is $0.81 million to restore additional capacity, is not new spending. It was agreed in the original annual plan precisely because we recognise the pressure on this route. Selwyn's growth trajectory is not slowing down, and the question for this council at this point is not whether we will need to invest more in high-capacity, high-frequency connections between Ralston and our city, it is when. And whether we are prepared to think beyond the current mode to meet that demand at the scale it will eventually require. Supporting a trial keeps this corridor active, builds the patronage evidence base, and ensures we're not starting from scratch when the conversation about long-term solutions for this connection inevitably arrives.
Councillor Sunkel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and it pleases me to be able to second this motion. Whilst I agree with the 3 that sit there, 7, 8 and 9, I do particularly want to speak to number 7. Councillor Davies has outlined the growth of Selwyn. At this point in time, there are over 34,000 people living in Rolleston, and we know that there are another 7,500 sections in play for growth. Every growth prediction within Selwyn on a 5 and a 10-year basis has been fulfilled within 2 to 3 years. So if we think about another 7,500 sections potentially being filled over the next 5 years, Rolleston will be a city in 3 or 4 years' time. And a city of 50,000 people does require a good working public transport system. We can talk about trains, we can talk about all manner of options, but between now and then, we need to maintain the uplift for a community that will continue to grow into the future. And I also note the growth in Prebbleton, I note the growth in Lincoln, I note the growth in West Melton and Kerwee. If we take that 7,500 projection for Wollaston, Selwyn, if it stays where it is, will be over 100,000 people, in my mind, in 3 to 5 years. And that does not speak to the growth within those other communities. I would think in 10 years' time it will be 120, 125,000 people as a district if it remained within its boundaries. So it is beholding on us to ensure that there is good transport and that we continue to build transport links into that community to reduce the pressures. It's not just about the cost or the pricing. It is providing a good service to a building, growing community. So I commend all three to you, but in particular number 7. Thank you.
Councillor Mackenzie.
I agree with Councillors Sunkel and Davies that Selwyn, well, Rolleston in particular, is a fast-growing community, and that they want transport options to go into Christchurch. But what is a very clear message from the ratepayers in Rolleston and across the Selwyn district is they want a higher proportion of user pays. And that's a very clear message, and it was a clear message at the time of the local body elections, and it's a very clear message to the Selwyn District Council in their annual plan submissions. And so I find myself not being able to support this because we haven't actually addressed how that service is paid for. And the clear message from the people out there is that they want it to be a higher proportion. They want the users to pay a higher proportion, and that's been a consistent message for a while out of the Selwyn district. And so I struggle with 7. I'm happy to support 8 and 9.
Thank you, Councillor Mackenzie. Is there any other? Councillor Scott.
Yeah, I will be supporting this, but I would also note the comments that Councillor Mackenzie has made and Councillor Sunkel in terms of the growth of that area. And does it seem to be able to stand alone in that? Because one of the conversations that we're having, obviously going forward, is about how we put things together, or how we look. We won't even put things together, where we draw the lines on the map. And I think it's a very, very good point that Councillor Sunkel made. If you look at what's going on from the south, the outlier is Selwyn, and so that needs to be considered carefully. And if it sits on its own as its own public transport authority, what does that mean? And so I'll support this, but that will be my question.
Any further debate on this? On the item 789, Councillor Moody.
Yep, I'm also supportive of these motions for the wise reasons outlined by the previous speakers. It's good to see us thinking ahead and ensuring sustainable public transport across our region.
Okay, Councillor Davies, right a reply. Councillor Sunkel, do you have anything to finish off? You do? Okay, Councillor Davies, right a reply. Okay, so we'll move. We'll vote for item 7. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Any against? Councillor Mackenzie, do you want that noted? Please note Councillor Mackenzie against. That's carried. Now we'll move. We'll vote for items recommendation 8 and 9. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Any against? That's carried. So Councillor Mackenzie, just note Councillor Mackenzie against for item 7. Thank you very much. Now I know I have been presented with a motion for in the public transport core service. So can we please get that up on screen?
So we did 8 and 9.
Yes, we did 8 and 9. They were carried. Yep, and that was the same mover and seconder.
Yes, that's cool. So now we're
moving on to the foreshadowed motion. Yep. So this is a foreshadowed motion. This is in regards to Route 1 and 5. Now, I've asked Councillor Joe Davies to put this forward as the core service lead, but I've been working as well with him on this because yesterday there's a lot of fast-moving paces in regards to Routes 1 and paces. A lot of fast-moving pieces in regards to Route 1 and 5. The business case is about to be is being worked on, and it could be approved by NZTA very soon. Yesterday we had a conversation with Chris Bishop as well, reinforcing that the funding that we want is for this route 1 and 5. There is a very much need for this. There's a lot of people using this, and people are not being able to get picked up, and it was part of our original program. Giles, if you want to come to the table and just talk through the rationale of these resolutions so that council can fully understand what's being put forward.
Yep, thank you, Chair. So first of all, we've treated the two separately, even though they're a single business case. They clearly are two separate routes, so council can make a decision on them individually. We've also recognised that the timing of decisions that the council makes in relation to its annual plan and long-term plan are on a different cycle than the decisions that NZTA makes through its NLTP decisions, which normally follow in about August, September, after council has made decisions on its annual plan and long-term plan. So what we've tried to set out here is that the first step is the business case is submitted, and that is then approved or not by NZTA. NZTA then has to make a decision about whether it has any funding to support the implementation of that business case in the current triennium for the NLTP, which is 24-27. So they may have some spare cash because certain projects and programs over the 3 years have not progressed at the pace they wanted, or they may not. Council could still choose to implement based on the approved business case in advance of NZTA funding being available. So that's why we're saying that if you wanted to, business case is approved, regardless of NZTA decision, we could implement the uplift for both of those using reserves to fund not only our local share, but also ideally on an interim basis, the national share that NZTA would be providing. The similar situation arises again in 27-28 when you will have decided on your long-term plan, and the decisions that NZTA will make relating to 27-30 will not be made till after you have approved your long-term plan. So worst case scenario is your council could potentially be funding the total cost of the uplift for routes 1 and 5 up until NZTA funds, assuming they do, through the NLTP in 27-28. Recognising that this will only be viewed as a trial initially, because we need to prove and demonstrate that the uplift is delivering its benefits to be included in what is ultimately called the continuous programme, and also recognising that clearly we cannot predetermine a decision from NZTA through the NLTP 27-30. They may choose still not to fund it, even though they think it's a great business case, because decisions from government are that funding is not available for public transport. Though that provides, worst case scenario, a council with the rest of 27-28 to make a decision about whether it wishes to continue on with funding in future years, dependent on NZTA's decision. I hope that's vaguely clear.
I've got quite a few questions, which is good. Councillor Scott first, then Councillor Mackay, and then Councillor Campbell, and then Councillor Davis.
I can completely understand the cautious approach to this. However, it is batting down the right line for us in terms of PT futures and the uplift that we require. We've always been in the situation about that timing, when the funding comes, You get a new government, do you get GPS change, do you get a change of... So that's the risk, I guess. My question to you, it's just the leading question, is what's the chances? What's the chances of change? I'll say I'll put... What was that? No, I'm not going to ask Ding. I'm going to ask these guys.
Jesse, you were in the conversation yesterday as well, so it might be useful for you to come up as well.
It's predicated on the fact that that transport staff have been reasonably accurate in my past 10 years. Although they're cautious, they seem to know which way the wind's blowing when these things come around. So I ask it in that context, Jesse.
So NZCA have historically indicated broad support for PT Futures and broad support for the Route 1 and 5, obviously subject to the business case stacking up. The question is funding availability. In the scheme of the total value of the NLTF, this is small change. So I would, if I was a betting man, which I'm not, I think that we are more likely than not to get funding for this route uplift probably in 27-28, and we may get it in 26-27.
Through you, Chair, I tend to agree. While the GPS last time did take a big swing towards roads of national significance, maintenance and renewals, I think we may see a rebalancing towards the funding, but we're going to see a very constrained NLTF as the signals that we're getting going forward. So when you think about continuous programs and our maintenance renewals of our roading network and things like that, you'll see the funding towards that, but there'll be a limitation around improvements across the country. But I think we might see, the inkling I had yesterday is that we might see a bit more of a rebalancing, hopefully. But certainly the Minister was very interested in what's happening down here in Christchurch and Canterbury.
And he made some positive signals, didn't he?
Absolutely. Yeah. No, you see the growth happening in Christchurch in particular and Canterbury more broadly. So certainly he was quite buoyed by that. We can take what we can from that conversation, but certainly I walked out of the room positive.
Yep. Councillor Law Mackenzie.
Just further on that discussion you had with the Minister, was it raised that we have the highest subsidy rate from ratepayers to the users of the service? Was that an issue with the Minister?
No.
That wasn't raised, no.
Councillor Mackay.
Yeah, look, through you, just going to go back to my earlier question, but with regard to Route 1, my memory recall is that we were only talking for uplift to Belfast. How does this fit in with the bigger requirement coming out of Waimakuru at the moment, whereas I understand that we are got loaded buses? So,
through you, Mr. Chair, we're still reviewing what this would mean in terms of to the districts. So for both Route 1 and Route 5, and we're looking at how those interact with the direct services. So we can't answer that one yet, but we are looking at what capacity is needed, what are the problems, what are the issues. When we finalise the business case, it will come with a recommendation that will look to resolve those, but it's looking at it in a wider sense from a network perspective rather than just Route 1 per se. I just want to make it really clear as well, these are estimated costs, so we haven't completed the business case. So these are estimated values and figures. Once we've completed both the business cases, and essentially they are two separate business cases, so one for Route 1, one for Route 5, we'll be able to confirm the final funding.
Which is why it says up to. Yep. Yeah, who got Councillor Mackay? Question. Oh, sorry, Councillor Campbell.
Stay with us, Chair.
I'm here.
First comment is that, clearly we're in a different transport environment now than we were even 6 months ago. So I think we need. You've answered one of my questions in answering Councillor Mackay's question. My other question is, in seeing the increase in patronage and overcrowding that's happened since the fuel crisis. What is the story with these two services? Are these two that are particularly overcrowded or that there's particular demand for?
Yeah, so prior to the fuel crisis, there was overcrowding problems on certain segments of these routes. So that's what we're going back to have a look at in terms of what does that mean now, where do we need that capacity, and essentially where do we have over demand? Because it's not across the whole route and it's not across all times. So that's what we're looking at, is kind of what are the segments that we need to make sure that we focus the improvements.
So just to be clear, the uplift could be for parts of the route rather than the entire route?
Councillor Davis? Okay. Do I have anybody else that's got questions of staff? Councillor Gerard.
Route 5 goes to Hornby, doesn't it? Is that right? Yes. So will you be looking at that slight change in alignment so that they can go to the stop at the library, and is that in their scheme?
At this stage, Hornby is under review in terms of there's a Hornby access study that's happening. So that's in partnership with Christchurch City Council and with NZTA. We're not looking to change Route 5 at this stage. It's quite difficult to change a core route in terms of any slight deviation, but we are looking at it more holistically from a network perspective.
There is the whole of network review as well, and so I'd be encouraging people to put feedback into that. Councillor Mackenzie.
Just a couple of councillors have referenced the Middle East issues and, you know, the effect that had on fuel prices, and given that fuel prices have dropped at least $1, or diesel prices have dropped at least $1 since the peak, and there doesn't appear to be any shortage of diesel, and it looks like unlikely that it's going to become a major problem. Do you have a view as to whether that's going to take the pressure off the public transport system, or at what threshold do you think it might take the pressure off the public transport system as people revert back to their normal behaviour?
I think that general indications are that fuel prices will stay high for some time. I think the question then is whether people normalise themselves to those higher fuel prices or not. So we are working on the assumption that we will still see pressure on fuel prices for the rest of this year and probably the rest of the next financial year through to into 27-28. And obviously we have reserves within PT to help manage any additional costs of that, and also it will be reflected through the indexation calculation that NZTA do in terms of their support for public transport.
I think you misunderstood the question. The diesel prices are now probably only 50 cents ahead of where they were before the crisis started. And is there a threshold at which users of PT will go back to driving their own vehicles now that prices have stabilised, and it looks like there's more likely to be a downward trend in fuel prices than an upward trend in fuel prices?
I'm afraid we can't answer that question. There isn't a threshold that we are aware of. Obviously, it is price sensitive and it depends carrot and stick in terms of behaviour change. But what we're hoping we've seen is that people have seen how easy it is to use PT and essentially how cheap it is and how they can make it fit with their lives. So we would hope to see longer behaviour change.
Yeah, just in regards to that question, it might be useful just to talk about the numbers on Route 7 with the uplift. So do you have any stats on the growth of users on Route 7 when we approved that uplift?
So for the 12 months since the uplift was put in place in the end of April, there's 12% increase in patrons on Route 7. So that's quite a healthy step change.
So by providing the service, people have been using it?
Yeah, exactly. And Council will recall a number of briefings we've had on the network review work that we've been undertaking, and the strong message we've had from the community. They want reliability, they want frequency, they want directness to encourage them to use the service, and that's what we're seeing on Route 7.
And just in regards to Route 1 and 5, with what Councillor Mackenzie's question, sorry, I'm asking a question. Did you say that there was already overcrowding on Routes 1 and 5 before the fuel crisis came in?
Yeah, that's correct. Essentially, there's overcrowding at peak times in different directions. So as we talk to, it's not every section, so it's certain sections of the network. Route 7 still has overcrowding issues. So what we're looking at the moment is either assist buses or double-deckers and where they would best fit on our network. So there are still ongoing issues with over-demand, which is a great place to be, but obviously we need to look at how we respond to those.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Faulkner?
Thank you. The figures up there, and you mentioned that it was an estimate. Are you confident in the estimate? Because I know as a farmer, I put estimates in, and there can be quite a variability.
I'm afraid they're estimates. So would I expect it to change? Yes, I do. And it could be more than the amount that's up there. We'd need to finish the work. Obviously, we need to look at any problems that we have and challenges on the network. We've got a good opportunity now to respond to it. So we need to look at overcapacity. We need to look at the 10-minute frequency. And also we need to consider the potential that we need to move up to 7.5 minutes in peak. So those costs are likely to change.
So you'd be more confident in an increase than a reduction?
Yes.
Councillor Campbell.
I think the caveat to that is that that's the gross cost. So the cost to us, if NZTA funding is provided, is circa 50% of that. So we've, in a sense, painted an estimate of the total cost of the service on the assumption that NZTA does not come to the party. So my assumption is that at least for 27-28, those costs will be at least 50% lower, subject to the basis of the estimate.
Councillor Campbell.
So just also to be really, really clear, you've got both of these, if we end up spending that amount of money, will come from public transport reserves, so they won't have an impact on the rate that we're setting for the next year.
That's correct. If you choose to improve it through the PT reserves, and essentially as well, if we do need to change that figure, we can without having to go through an annual plan process because it's from PT reserves.
Can I just ask a question then from moving forward as well, after the funding ends, this is a targeted rate in Christchurch, isn't it?
No, it depends where the service improvement happens. Yes. So if it was just to happen within the...
Sorry, Greater Christchurch for the two pieces on the end, but the bulk of it's...
Yeah, but essentially if the improvements were just to happen, let's just say, for example, within the Christchurch boundary, it would just be Christchurch PT targeted rates. If the improvements go out to the districts, then yes, it would be a Greater Christchurch. And we would work out the proportion of those, which would fit with how we apportion all costs for PT.
Any further questions? Right, thank you very much, team, for answering all of those questions. I just want to get a direction here. Do I take the whole lot as one, or do we want to break them? Okay, so I'll take the whole lot as one. I'm getting a few nods there. So can I please get a... I might ask Councillor Davies to move it. Do you want to move this? And then I'll second it. Now, can I please open up for debate, Councillor Davies?
Yes, great. This is here today. And we first raised the idea of locally funding this on the 27th of November last year. So a day short of 6 months since then. And I just really thank the Chair for his work in this. And the kind of discussions that we've had with staff and Giles as well, and how we've come to this point. Because 1 and 5 are part of the backbone of our network and of public transport futures. The 1 also runs the length of the future MRT corridor from Cashmere to Belfast. Belfast to Hornby, but the 1 and the 5 intersect. These are existing high patronage routes where we know frequency improvements drive ridership. The Route 7 uplift has demonstrated that 12%, as Stuart said, when we moved to 10-minute frequencies, patronage responded. And so this is an opportunity to lift 2 of our busiest corridors to a higher level of service. The spatial plan also directs 75% of new housing and a large percentage of new employment along these corridors. Waiting for funding may mean years of suppressed demand, overcrowding, and a weakened case for the mass rapid transit investment that all partners agree this city needs. Locally funding this uplift sends a clear signal to central government and to NZTA that Canterbury is serious about our public transport future. It strengthens our NLTP bid with patronage evidence, and most importantly, it delivers an improvement in service for our people in the short term.
Councillor Scott.
Yep. Yeah, thank you for this. Look, I think this is a really good piece of work supporting PT Futures, which has always been predicated on getting to the MRT that's recognised in the spatial plan, and the comments around Minister Bishop's support for this really are encouraging. And I think there's a couple of things, and a comment that was made by staff was when projects are available and supported and there is money, that they will get supported also by central government. We were in a meeting in Timaru, and I won't say who said this, but we were talking about Auckland Transport, and Auckland Transport having business cases ready for support. And when other regions couldn't support their business cases, the money, to quote the person, was hoovered up by Auckland. I think we need to get a hoover, actually. But I think that's a good indication of where we need to sit in terms of this work. And like, there's a lot of this work being done. You know, we only have to ask you, and you'll have an opinion on where we need to go with this. So this is a good piece of work, Joe, and well presented by Joe and supported by the chair. So thank you.
Councillor Sunkel.
Thank you. Thank you again. Really pleased to support these motions that have been put forward. The bus service, the 86 from Darfield is oversubscribed, and we've attempted to resolve some of those issues. But again, the resolutions we put in place are oversubscribed again. The 84, the 85, the trial, the Bentley trial at times is oversubscribed, and the transition across there creates real issues. We know there is demand. We know people really require and need those services. To Councillor Mackenzie's contention about pricing, yes, we can have that conversation, but we need to provide the service in the first place to actually put people on buses, get them to where they want to go. So I am really pleased that we have this opportunity with the 5, which is the direct service from Rolleston, the uplift there. Absolutely need it. And I hope in the future that we can further work on the 84, 85 and 86, because they are all oversubscribed at times. That is just the uplift of growth within the Selwyn district and Rolleston in particular. Thank you.
Is anybody going to speak against this? Councillor Mackenzie?
I'd just it would be pity if somebody didn't. Got
to have always somebody.
And it's been it's interesting. I've become one of the great unwashed masses of Christchurch who pay rates and targeted rates now to the public transport system, and it is quite a substantial amount of money, and on an annual basis. And I'm conscious of the fact that we have the highest subsidy rate for public transport in New Zealand, from ratepayers to the users of that service. And I think if we are to continue to provide the service, we need to start to reflect that true cost on those who use that service to a greater extent. And so I'm not sure if I'm actually opposed to this motion. I think I might abstain, but I am of the view that we need to review our fare structures pretty urgently in providing the service. And I take Councillor Sunkel's point. You need to provide the service before you then start charging the people for it. But I think one is connected to the other.
Okay, I'm going to ask if there's anybody else wants to speak. Okay, Councillor Davis.
I totally agree in a way, but we do need to remember that fare box fixation for public transportation you need to think of it as a greater good in a way, because if you have a humming PT, you have a humming economy. And this is what the central government is just starting to figure out. And we are part of it. We're like the third child who's just getting the scraps. But if we can just keep pushing, we are like, we need a Hoover, right? So I'm for, but we have to, it's the greater good. It is for the greater good, because if they're saving money taking PT, then they're spending money in the local shop. This is how it's the economy.
Okay. I understand that Councillor Mackay is pulling me up for my own rulings from before, but I will carry on. Is there anybody else that wants to speak on this? Because I just wanted to say a couple of things. I just in regards to the comments around us being the most subsidised in the country, that is not the case anymore. Since we increased the fares 50%. Was it last year or 18 months ago? That equation has slightly changed. There are some other parts of the country that have higher subsidies now than we do in our public transport system. So it would be useful to get an update on that at some stage. I think it would be very good to see the trajectory of both the growth and the private revenue ratio share. The piece there, I support it, and I'm very supportive of it, because this is putting a stake in the ground from our perspective. I'm doing everything I can to advocate for the NZTA National Land Transport Funding, and I will continue to do that. There is positive signs, but remember, this is the big picture is around the transport-orientated urban development, which is the MRT and the routes 1 and 5 complete that staple of that kind of cross-grid across the city, where you can then start looking at the overarching architecture of the rest of the rest of the network to feed into that, so that you can start planning towards that MRT or for that where that urban development goes, because we all know that we can't just keep continuously growing out. We need to be thinking about core routes where you invest in the infrastructure, and that's the missing piece. And this is where we do need to do that work on how we align these decisions to the decisions of the City Council or whoever's going to do this into the future, whether it's combined or whether it's someone else, which will make this easier, because you need to think about the infrastructure. And I understand the Christchurch City Council is doing the business case for the infrastructure alongside this, which gives me heart to say that there is a combined effort of both the service uplift and the infrastructure and the advocacy to get the other 50%. And I know that there's an opportunity, so we'll take this opportunity while we've got it. So I think this is really good. I support it. And thanks to all the councillors who have been involved in this continuous advocacy. I need to individually point out Councillor Davies and also Councillor Campbell as well for your advocacy that you've been putting into this as well. And also Councillor Sunkel from the Rolleston point of view. So can I please get all those in favour? Oh, no, sorry, Councillor Davies, do you want to write a reply? No. Okay, all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against? And Councillor Mackenzie is abstaining. That's a massive move up. All right, thank you so much, team. We will go straight to recommendation number 10, which is really just a procedural. I'll just get that up on the screen, which is delegate to the Chief Executive the ability to correct minor errors on this plan.
Yeah, move.
Oh, Deputy Chair Cromwell's going to move that. We'll get Councillor Ward to second it. Councillor Cromwell, do you want to say anything to this?
No, it's just a procedural matter, but most confidence in our acting CEO.
Thank you. Councillor Ward is the seconder. I just want to personally say thank you so much to the staff who have done an incredible amount of work on bringing this to us today. It's always interesting, the whole process and getting it in. And I also want to thank the councillors for the way that you have conducted yourself. I know that these things are always tricky and you do want to have your voice, you want to have your say, you want to get things into this. But I think it's been good to highlight some of those pieces that councillors find really important. And I really am pleased and proud of the way that we've worked together to make this plan to where it's got. We started at some quite high number. We got a draft annual plan out. We're down to around 2.4% today. Might be a little bit more, 2.4, 2.5. That's a really good place for us to be. And I think we should be proud of ourselves for the way that we've conducted this Does anybody else want to say anything? Okay, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Any against? That's carried. Well, there we go. The next council meeting will be held on Wednesday, the 27th of May, which is tomorrow. The draft annual plan, Mahere Tau, will be presented to the council on 24th of June 2026 for formal adoption. I now invite Councillor Robinson to close our meeting with a karakia.
Haki roto, haki waho. Kia tau te mori e kokiri nei. I ngā piki me ngā heke. Ko te rangi maere taku e rapu nei. Te ai mori ora.
Kia ora. I declare the meeting closed at 12:08. Thank you very much. If Councillor